Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa. I'm Rochelle Ferguson-Biahi with the top stories for you on the continent. In Rwanda, presidential election campaigning kicks off ahead of polls on August the 4th. 3 candidates, including the incumbent Paul Kagame, are vying for the country's top job. Continuing violence in DR Congo's Kasai region has led to thousands of people fleeing. Our correspondent travels to the town of Idiofa, where 3,000 people have already sought refuge. And €183 million is the estimated annual shortfall for the African audiovisual sector. This owing to piracy. As the Yaoundé Film Festival approaches, the fight against piracy is taking centre stage. But first, presidential election campaigning kicked off in Rwanda this Friday with 3 candidates vying for the country's top job. President Paul Kagame of the RPF Inkotanyi, Frank Habineza of the Democratic Green Party, and Philip Mpayimana, an independent candidate, each held campaign rallies outside of the capital, Kigali. Well, in the town of Ruhungo, Kagame told supporters that critics could not change the will of the people. Meanwhile, few have heard of the president's opponents. France 24's Laurent Bersticker has this report.
It's been a long road for Frank Habineza, but after 8 years of struggle, the leader of Rwanda's Democratic Green Party is finally on the ballot for the upcoming presidential elections.
I had death threats myself, so many death threats, and some of them had been published in newspapers, and people used even to threaten me physically. And after the death of my vice president, it became too bad. I had to leave the country. I went to exile.
Habineza managed to register his party in 2013, but it was only confirmed as a presidential candidate last Friday, a week before the start of the campaign. With little money and even less time to drum up support, he will face an uphill battle in his challenge of incumbent president Paul Kagame, who's expected to register a landslide win in August. Yet despite the odds being stacked against him, the third man in the race, independent candidate Philip Mpayimana, believes Rwandans are ready for change.
I want to give my country the opportunity to say that it has entered a new era where democracy is possible.
Paul Kagame's ruling RPF party, which is widely credited with bringing order and stability to the country following the 1994 genocide, has been in power for the past 23 years. And while critics denounced the regime's systematic repression of the opposition and the media, Kagame has remained an extremely popular figure.
He brought development, electricity, water. He took us out of our huts, and now we have real houses. Why wouldn't we love him?
Critics have called the election a political charade to give a false impression of democracy and argue real opposition parties have been banned from running. Paul Kagame, who changed the constitution to be able to run for a 3rd term, won the 2003 and 2010 elections with more than 90% of votes.
Today, our Congo next, where continuing violence in the country's Kasai region has led thousands of people to flee to neighbouring provinces and Angola. In the town of Idiofa, 60 kilometres from the border with the Kasai, some 3,000 people have already sought refuge. Well, after long weeks of walking in the bush, they arrive exhausted and traumatised. Thomas Nicolon and Ellen Gainsford report from Idiofa.
Weary at the end of their journey, these villagers from the Kasai region have had to flee their homes to escape the Kamwina and Sapu militia. They've walked for 2 weeks to get here.
I lost my wife and my 2 children. It was torture. They were killing people, assassinating them and confiscating all their things.
Francois is now in Idiofa, 60 kilometers from the border with Kasai, where violence involving militias, soldiers and the police began in September 2016. According to the Catholic Church, more than 3,000 people have died in the fighting, and 1,300,000 people have fled their homes. Many are severely traumatized.
I fled with my 2 children, but one of them died during the journey. I can't get the image out of my head. But I feel a bit better here. I hope to have time to recover.
The UNHCR and its local partners have come to the aid of the 3,000 displaced people, providing food and temporary shelters. Some are staying in this abandoned hospital, others with host families. With more than 100 people arriving each day, more help is needed.
There are essential goods like buckets and tarpaulins that are given to the displaced people. But given the scale of the crisis, it's not enough.
The government says that the situation in Kasai is growing calmer. But many of the displaced don't want to return to their homes where their loved ones were killed. Most want a fresh start, in a place where they can heal and rebuild.
In other news on the continent, Nigeria's parliament has vowed to investigate reports that a Cameroonian military unit killed 97 fishermen in the oil-rich Bakusi Peninsula last week. Nigeria ceded the area to Cameroon in 2008. Its officials accused Cameroon of violating an accord signed between the two countries to protect citizens. And according to reports, the killings were over a $300 fishing levy. Cameroon has yet to respond to the allegations. In Congo, Brazzaville, campaigning has come to an end ahead of parliamentary and local elections set for Sunday. It's the first vote since controversial presidential elections in 2016. Well, women have until now been largely underrepresented in parliament, but this time a large number of females will be vying for seats. Civil society groups have called for the elections to be boycotted in solidarity with the people in the country's Pool region, where conflict has been ongoing for the last year. France's annual Bastille Day military parade and celebrations took place on the Champs-Élysées here in Paris this Friday. The US President Donald Trump was the guest of honour at this year's event, which coincided with the 100th anniversary of the US joining its allies in World War I. Well, the parade was broadcast across Africa, including in DR Congo, where people watched the event at home and in public places in the capital, Kinshasa.
I thought it was really a great parade. We're not used to seeing this in Africa. I've never seen anything like it in DRC. I enjoyed the historical meeting between Emmanuel Macron and Donald Trump. And I really appreciated the tribute to the victims of the Nice terror attack.
And finally, €183 million is the estimated annual shortfall for the African audiovisual sector due to piracy. Well, as the Yaoundé Film Festival approaches, the fight against piracy is set to take centre stage. Our correspondents sent us this report from Yaoundé.
Television series, American movies and even hundreds of African films are all available on DVD here at Yaoundé's Central Market, the place to go to for pirated films and series. An everyday haggling scene between a pirated DVD salesman and his client, except this client is none other than Jean Roch, a famous Cameroonian producer and director who's come to see the magnitude of piracy in the country firsthand.
All the beneficiaries, all those who've lost money by creating new things, like Wagalov, like Bobo Diouf, all those producers don't recover their money, because all the movies are being pirated when they air on television, and then resold through the piracy networks.
According to the association Convergence, piracy is draining nearly 120 million CFA francs from the African audiovisual industry, an illegal activity that thousands of people depend on, like this salesman who agreed to talk to us anonymously.
We know that the sales of pirate CDs is forbidden, we know it, but what are we supposed to do? We make our living from it. It helps us and it helps others. Not everyone can buy original CDs, we hardly even see them, and that's the real problem.
For customers and cinema enthusiasts, buying cheap pirated DVDs is a necessity, as originals are hard to come by and come at a bigger cost.
You want people to buy the original version when we can barely afford to buy food. How much does an average Cameroonian spend on a daily basis in order to afford an original CD worth 5,000 francs?
Piracy will be at the heart of discussions held during the Écran Noir Film Festival, which opens on Saturday in Yaoundé.
Well, you are up to date with the top stories on the African continent. Stay tuned. Coming up, more international headlines here on France 24.
France in Focus, presented by Nadia Charbet.
The must-see program to understand France, its history and culture. An original look at French society and topical themes, revealing just what makes France and the French so unique.
France in Focus, en France 24 and france24.com.